Where we're holding in Perek Tezayin, where we're holding right now, the word that's significant is the word Yossi. It appears in the Perek, I think, 3 times. Yossi means es soll gewen recht. It fits, it's appropriate, it's just, it would be right. In other words, I said to you before I put the recorder on that in Pasha Shmois, which we read Shabbos yesterday in Shul, you have a Yoel Moshe. The Yoel Moshe means Moshe agreed, Moshe acquiesced. But the word Yoel doesn't mean to agree. Yoel means to farvilligen, to willfully agree. You understand? So the word Yoel, Yud Vov Aleph Lamed, or whatever the shadish of the word is agreeing to something because it's the right thing to do. But Yoel Moshe L'Shavah says, "Ish v'yitin le'tzipayda b'ita le'isha." Moshe Rabbeinu stays by Yisrael, and he gives him tzipayda. But the truth of the matter is, you know why Yoel Moshe was ish? Because v'yitin le'tzipayda. Right? There's a midrashim that when Yisrael found Moshe Rabbeinu, he put him in a dungeon, and tzipayda fed him for all those years, and he wouldn't die. He says, how could a person live without food? So he took him out of the pit, and he married tzipayda. So Vayoel doesn't just mean he agreed. He acquiesced. He agreed willingly. And the word Yossi has a similar shadish, as far as I know, as far as I think. It means it's the correct thing. It's the reasonable thing. It's the way it should be. In other words, it's not just this is how it is, but it's how it is because how it's supposed to be. But the word Yossi has a slightly different connotation. Because the word Yossi means you don't have it, but you should. It should be, even if it isn't. And the fact that something is meant to be, or destined to be, or correct to be, and it's not, is the beginning of being. In other words, when things are supposed to be a certain way and they're not that way, the fact that it's supposed to be this way brings it closer to actually being this way. That's the spirit of this word Yossi. That's the spirit of this word Yossi. What are we dealing with? We're dealing with a Mayach Shalt Al Alev Beinani. That's what we're dealing with. Well, let's be more basic. We're dealing with an Oved Elikim Beinani. Right? Today, yes, it's Mamish Techitas. Today we finished Tezayin. Yesterday's Chitas is what we're going to be learning now. And the week before is Perek Tezvav. The day before is Perek Tezvav, which we just recently learned. There's a Beinani who's called Avodah. He's working. And the nature of his Avodah is that he's working to reveal Ava Mesoteres. He's a Yid, he has a Neshama, or to use the correct term. He has a Teva, a nature, a personality of involvement with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If he actualizes his Teva, developing feelings for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's already Oved Elikim. There's another fellow who's not using his mind to arouse his Teva, he's using his mind to create original feelings. What we call Moyach Shalit Al Alev. And Shalit in this case does not mean the mind controls the heart. Shalit means in this case the mind educates us. I say this every single week. It says in the end of the first Maimon of Hemshech Haybeis, V'shosha Gdimu Terav, that Rebbe Rashab says that sometimes Moyach Shalit Al Alev does not mean that the mind rules the heart, but the mind educates the heart. Or in the language of Perek Membeis, there's Melucha Memshala. When the Nefesh Elokis is a Melech, so Shalit means educates, and when Nefesh Elokis is a Shalit or a Moshel, so Shalit means controls. So Moyach Shalit, a person does his limud, and after limud there's his bonus, and after his bonus, after Hashem Yiras Hashem. If a person achieves this fully, so there's 2 things you got to know about that guy. Number 1, that's called Aveda Tamal Beinani. It's the highest Madrega Beinani. Number 2, the cloud God, the point of all of this is the point of all of this Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem is our translates into action. That's the key. Not how I feel, but what I do about it. You know, a person can have Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and Lav Dafka is 100% Kifi, that's Ne'elyin. So the Alter Rebbe begins to Zayin by saying, you know, the cloud God. The whole point of everything we learned about Limud and his bonus and Ava V'yireh is Kiyam HaMitzvos B'Maisa B'Pil Mamish. But then we have a Klal Gadol Sheni, right? 10 lines into the Perek, we had a second Klal Gadol. And the second Klal Gadol, V'yetzer Al Kein Tzadach Leid the Klal Gadol, is we're dealing with a person who's called Eved Elokim. He's working and developing a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's not relying on his Tunas HaNefesh, weißt doch. Masmin b'limudei b'tivei, mitzunin b'tivei, mechuser hergesh hano b'tivei, in which case the Beinin is called Layavada because the Avos is not being stirred. This is an Ovid. He's learning, he's trying to develop feelings. Now, but then the engine doesn't turn over. The compressor, the compressor doesn't go on. So the machine is making noise and it's hot in the room. The Ava Vayira, the energy, doesn't happen. And we learned last week the Haggah. I don't usually teach you the Haggahs. That the Haggah explains that sometimes it's not up to you. It's not even in Pshat, you're not working hard enough. The Eibush did not give you the kind of neshama which allows for the engine to turn over, for the Aviyah to be complete. And the Kitzah, this summary of the Haggah is that there's a Lashon Hazayah. This is a whole Hemshech Samachei from the Rebbe Rashab. Class Kishon Gu class. 3 is curled up in 3 and curled up in 3. You have a Chabad and you have a Chagas and you have a Nehi. When a baby is in utero, right? When a baby is in an ibur, the baby is curled up. It's called the fetal position. In Zaya language, the fetal position is called Tlas, Klilon Gu Tlas. The Chabad is curled by Chabad. The Chabad is wrapped by the Chagas, and the Chagas is wrapped by the Nehi. So when the baby is unborn, the only level of the baby which functions is only the Nehi. Which is why the Chazal say, Piv sosum betaburi patua. You eat from your tabur, you eat from the navel, you eat from the belly, from the stomach. The mouth is closed, because the only thing which is functioning in a baby prior to its born, even if it's completely whole, with shaitas and sipanayim and everything, is the nehi. And when the baby is born, there's a process which is actually called boinen. The shaila, if you're allowed to do it on Shabbos, when you stretch out the limbs of a newborn baby, it's a status of boinen. Just like when you make milk into cheese, it's called butter. It's called boinen. It's called boinen in Hilchos Shabbos. It's called boinen. When you take a baby, a brand new, and you stretch him out, it's boinen. So that the shaila, the baby is muktzah, and they see the shenis and mishunas, if you're allowed to do it on Shabbos. No, it's true. And the boine is you stretch the baby out. Stretching the baby out is that the body should not be curled. It should be fully stretched. So practically, every baby, if you're human, we walk upright. Animals remain horizontal. Remaining horizontal means that the 3 levels are the same. Human beings are meant to be upright. The Chabad is higher than the Chagas, and the Chagas is higher than the Nehi. But mystically, it's possible for a person to be born and to remain in the Nehi state like before he was born. If a person is in the Neshama of Elam Ha'asiyah, the only level of the Nefesh which functions is the Nehi. And if you learn the Samachei Hemshech, you'll know he has a brain and he has a heart, it's all on the Nehi level. So his understanding is limited, and his ability to contemplate, to concentrate, his boldness, his heart, and his ability to feel is nil. If a person is mystically half unfurled, half uncurled, so the Chagas is stretched out, the Nehi is stretched out, but the Chagas is surrounding the Chabad. So this person is able to have Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem from Teva. He's able to have feelings like HaKadosh Baruch Hu based on the personality that the Eibishter gave him, but he cannot have the Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, Meyach, Shal Talalev, that the brain is creating original feelings. If the baby is completely unfurled, in other words, the Neshama is, the Nehi is separated from the Chagas, and the Chagas is separated from the Chabad. So the Chabad functions, that person can learn, that person can think, and to create original feelings. And mystically, this is a Neshama of Bria, a Neshama of Yetzirah, and a Neshama of Asiyah. The Neshama of Asiyah, the only thing he is functioning, and let's be blunt, those are Nemir, this is us. The Neshamas of Yetzirah are a high Madrega. The Neshama of Yetzirah could already be Madrega's Tzaddik. They're functioning with the Teva, they're serving Hashem with their personality, they're not going outside their nature. But their nature loves Hashem, you understand? The Neshamas of Bria, they have already Seichel, Chabad, and they can create feelings of love and fear for HaKadosh Baruch Hu which are not consistent with their nature. So the Alter Rebbe says if a person does limud, and he does his bonanas, and the Ava Vayira doesn't happen, sometimes it's not even a possibility. If he has a Neshama of Elam HaYetzirah, or if he has a Neshama of Elam HaAsiyah, and the Lashon and the Haggah is that it remains Ibur Vehelim after the baby has been born. and physically, biologically, they did this act of boyness, stretching out the limbs and setting the limbs. The arms should be the ball and socket should be where it's supposed to be, over here and over here, and but Beruch is that baby is still curled up. It's a fetus forever. That's a neshama vasiyah. If it's like a half curl, yeah, that's a neshama of bria. And if it's completely unfurled, it's a neshama of bria. If it's half curled, it's a neshama of yetzira. If it's completely open, it's a neshama of bria. So the Alter Rebbe says this question of a person doing his bonus, which is supposed to bring to Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and it's not happening, is not even in his bchira. It's the Eibusha created him this way. So the Alter Rebbe adds the word Yossi. But he's doing all the work. He's doing all the work. He's spending his time learning. He's spending his time trachten chassidus. He thinks, and it's Yossi. And the Rebbe says two Yossas. The Eibusha deserves to be loved, and he deserves to love him. Both. The Eibusha deserves to be loved, and this person deserves to be the one who loves him. So the Alter Rebbe says an additional point. But before I tell you the point, if you don't mind, I want to reread last week's shtikala. I'm not going to do the Haggadah over, and I'm not going to elaborate a lot. I do want to read. I'll start from the Yesed Al Kain, okay? We're on page Chafalaf Medbeis. That means page 42. Let's read. The Yesed Al Kain is another thing. The Tzadok Leid the Klal Gadol, which is also Klal Gadol. Ba'aveda lebeinanim, and the beinanim is Avedas Hashem. Beinanim is called Avodah. And there's a second Klal Gadol than Avedas Hashem. Shagam im ye'in yad sichli. If the hand of his wisdom, v'ruach b'nasi, and the spirit of his wisdom is not sufficient, maseges to der gerechen, to reach, lahoilet, to birth, avas havaya behis galus li be'allah for Hashem, which is altogether revealed, which is boy and kirish be'esh, burning with a fire that's attached to coal. It means it has a heat. V'chefetz, and a desire b'chafetz, with a desire b'chashek, and a longing chuk and a thirst. Mur geshes, which the person can feel, right? A great English-American word, because Americans are never so emotional. To emote. Emote. You know what emote means? Tell everybody how you feel. Es emotes nicht. He can be emoting about shtusim, but when it comes to the Eibusha, the emotions don't happen, yeah? L'dovka bay, to become attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, way of dvekah. The love remains concealed. So there's a love there. He's doing the work. He's doing the learning. He's doing the hisbodinus. The compressor isn't turning over, and as the Rebbe says, Naga, it's not his fault. His neshama is in a compromised state. That's what the Eibusha created. The love, Mr. Teres, is concealed in his mind. And hidden resources. So there's two expressions here, okay? One is called Tvunas Moichoi, and the other is called Ta'alumes Libe. Tvuna is different than Binu. Tvuna is Asias Ben Ubas. Tvuna, Tov, Beis, Vov, Nun, Hey, has the words Ben Ubas in it. And it says in Kabbalah, but they mentioned in the later Haggadah, that Tvuna means that the Ben Ubas are hidden in Bina. Ben Ubas is Ava V'Yiras, son and daughter, love and fear, are hidden in the yes. So Tvunas Moiche means the mind is engaged with Elokus. And there's what's called Midas Shebeseichel, the mind understands. And the mind understands that because you think about the Eibusha, the Dvarim HaMaviyim of the Ava, the Dvarim HaMaviyim of the Yira, you're thinking about Hashem in a way which should elicit love and should elicit fear. But the emotions don't come out because of things which are not entirely in my capability, not in my possibility, yes? But in the mind, there is a leaning towards these things, even if I don't feel it actually. It's like Tvunas Moiche, the understanding of the mind. Tvunas Moiche means how in the mind you have Ben Ubas, how in the Seichel you have what's called Midas Shebeseichel. Then you have Talumis Levi, it's the heart. And there's a certain certain tendency, a certain leaning, but it's concealed, it's not revealed, right? The Rebbe spoke once, I heard from the Rebbe once, Alenge ahead, that the Rebbe was talking about the idea that mitzvahs have to be b'maisa. Mitzvahs have to be asiya, actual. So the Rebbe asked the question, upon the Friedrich Rebbe talks about this. What is the maisa b'peil of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem? What's the action, the behavior of loving God and fearing God? And the Rebbe said that the heart has an increased rate. As clapped. When the heart beats faster, that's a consequence of your hisbodinus. That's a maisa b'peil. This guy's heart is not beating fast. It's not. Why? Because his neshama is in a state of ibor, a state of unika. There's no moichin. He's not a fully developed person, which is basically a neshama ve'elam abriya. He's the neshama ve'elam yetzira or neshama ve'elam asiyah. But he puts in the work. So the midas in the moyach are called tvunas moichai, and the midas in the lev are called talumas libei. So to say he's done nothing is not honest. To say he's accomplished his aim is also not honest. He wishes to have feelings for Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ava v'yira. Understand? Ava v'yira is really madregas tzaddik. Ava v'yira is madregas tzaddik. Now for them, when the beinin is Ava v'yira, the reason it's not madregas tzaddik, because when you finish the hisbonenus, the Ava v'yira goes away, and the nefesh kiss comes back. Mashenka by tzaddik, because v'libi cholol b'kirbi, the tzaddik has murdered, has completely killed his yetzer hara. There's nothing preventing the Ava v'yira from remaining all day long, because there's no opposition. But Ava v'yira is the equivalent of being like a tzaddik. If it's not tzaddik, it's the part of the heat tzaddik. Yeah, this fellow does the work, but the compressor is not turning over, so the Ava v'yira is there in a state of tunas meiche and talumas libe. There's an incredibly warm feeling to Zelakus, which cannot be translated into fully expressed emotion. And again, if you were here last Sunday, the koch in last week's class was the Maise mit Rebbe Hendel. Abyssal Yiddish Hatz. Abyssal Yiddish Hatz. I'll share this with you. Today is Chavov Tevis, yeah? Which means 26 minus 7 Chavzifel is 19. Last Sunday was Yotes Tevis. Am I correct? As 19 plus 7 is 26. So, my friends, we have a website, a group, a WhatsApp from the Kvutza. You have to have time to go on there. You have time to follow up. Anyway, so one of the Chavs sent around the video from Mashpia Netz Yisrael, who made a big deal out of Yotes Tevis. A große Tzimis. Apparently there was a Didan Notzach in Tov, the final. Didan Notzach was Yotes Tevis Tov Nun. And he tells stories. I mean, I was here. I don't even remember. Because it was quiet. And I think it was quiet by design. But the Bachram apparently knew. So this young man, every year since a certain date, he says he hasn't been doing it since 1990, since Tov Nun, but since Kach V'Kach Shonim, every year he makes a big fabreng. But he was on Zoom because of the Maimid Matzev. So the whole world watched him. So what did he talk about? He spoke for 20 minutes. He spoke for 3 minutes about Hey Tavis. He spoke for 17 minutes about Rabbi Hendel. It happened to be Rabbi Hendel's yahrzeit, I think. Yotes Tavis, Rabbi Hendel's yahrzeit. Rabbi Hendel Kugel, with whom the story that I told you last Sunday about. When I was telling you the story last Sunday, I didn't know this. I told you a story about the Chaneyach Hendel Kugel. I spent half the class talking about him. Later in the day, I discovered that day was his yahrzeit. I'm just a hashkocha protis. Somebody did the gashgocha. I had no idea. At night, I went home, I watched this video. He spoke about Chaneyach Hendel. He talked some very sweet things about his relationship. Whatever, his Avedis Hashem. He was a special chassid. Very close to the Rabbeim. Very close to the Rabbeim. To the Reb Marash, to the Reb Rashab, to the Friedrich Rebbe. And the story was that he davened on Ma'ariv and watched Shabbos for 5.5 hours. And he spilled enough tears to make an ocean. Why? Because he sat by a Chassidische Verbringung with the Reb Rashab. He says, the Haskalah, the philosophy, no, I didn't understand. I don't have to understand. But when you hear Sipurei Tzadikim, Sipurei Chasidim, stories that do with Avedis Hashem, and you're not moved, Abyssal Yiddish Hatz kommt yederit. If you were here last week, this was the quote, this was the Matbea Ma'alachas, this was the name of the Shir. If today's Shir is called Kach Yosa, last week's Shir was called Abyssal Yiddish Hatz. It's the same thing. Abyssal Yiddish Hatz means if a person does not have full feeling, full patch of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't mean it's 100 or 0. There's a leaning, there's a tendency, there's a desire, there's a warmth. It's not manifest in a palpitating heart. It's not manifest in emotions that are pronounced. But the Abyssal Yiddish Hatz is a very, very strong leaning in the direction of Alakus, because you're putting in all the work. You're not getting the full reward, but you're not getting nothing either. You're getting a significant, a substantial, partial reward. This is called Ava v'yira b'tvunas moichai v'talumas libe. The love is hidden in the mind, it's hidden in the heart, but it's there. So last week's Abyssal Yiddish Hatz is this week's Kach Yosa. Es is recht. It's just, it's righteous, it's fair. Let's read weiter. The Hainu, it means, in other words, Shalev Mevin, Beruach Chochmo, Bina Shebemeche. The mind understands. And I want you to know that in this case, the word Mevin means to be misboined. The mind, the heart, the mind is contemplating with the spirit of the wisdom and the understanding of the brain. Gdula saying, say, Baruch, great Zev HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That, Kula Kamei Kloch Shiv Mamish. That next to Alakus, everything is nothing. Ein, Movadi, Achtas Hashem. So the Rebbe says that Asher Akein Yosa. It would be right. It is just, it's fair, it's righteous, it's desirable. Lo Yizbarach. Hashem deserves. The first Yasa goes on the Eibishter. Yasa means it should be this way. It's desirable, it's correct, it's wantable. The first Yasa is that the Eibishter shetich leilov nefesh kol choy. That every human being in this world should be in a state of kilayin, of going out of himself to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? What's this? Why? Because ein eid mavade. Whereas, since it's a fact that kulach make lochashiv, next to Alakus nothing is real. So it's just, it's correct, it's yasa, that everything should be completely engaged with Hashem, with feeling. So the verse where he uses kaloyin. How do you translate kaloyin in English? Expiration. Expiration sounds like a bottle of milk that's going bad. Yeah. Expiration means expiring. Going out of oneself. Lidavik, to achieve dveikus. V'likol, to achieve his skalalus, whatever these two words mean. Ve'edet, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter deserves that we should love him. So first he spoke about the madrege of neshama, yeah? What he said, the Lashon inside? Nefesh kolcha, yeah? And he continues. And it's not just true of nefesh, not just true that there's a yasa, the Gabi de Meibishna, the Eibishter deserves. It would be right, it's just, as his recht, that we should have feelings of the Eibishter. The nefesh and ruach in the person, asher bekirbe, which is inside the human being. Kach yasa lahen. There's a second yasa. As his recht farzei, the neshama deserves. It's worthy from the neshama's angle, liyes kol selah, that they should have a kilayin to the Eibishter as well. B'chasheka with a longing, b'chafetz and a desire, l'tzeis min taken hu aguf, to go out of the sheath, the blockage, which is the body. The dov kabei to become attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A yid who's serious about avodas Hashem, and he puts in all of the work, and the ava remained with tavunas libe and tavunas meich and talumas libe. There's a yasa. There's two yasas. There's a yasa Hashem's yasa that we should love him, and the yid is yasa that he should love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what are you going to do? My neshama is curled up. My neshama is partially called up. Ibur it's called. Unika it's called. It's just not Moich. Asiya, Yetzirah, it's not B'riyah. So what is the person supposed to do? So there's a simple teretz. And this teretz is very, very important. The teretz is tell me, you're doing all of this work. You're not reaping the full reward. The Av Avayida of the what's called Aveda Tam in the previous painting, you're not experienced. But is your effort futile? Is your effort helping you in no way to serve Hashem? Or is it nevertheless helping to serve Hashem? Meaning to say, even though the feelings are not fully pronounced, but there's a bissel Yiddish hearts. A full Yiddish heart, hatanisht. A full Jewish heart he doesn't have. But a bissel Yiddish heart, to say that there's no emotion is also not true. There's a bissel, there's a substantial direction, it's called a netiya, a leaning towards Elokus. So the Rebbe is going to say a wonderful thing. If you do all the work, in my mind, when I think of this yasa, I imagine the bocher who goes to lane. He goes over to the Sefer Torah. He puts up the Eitz Chaims like an expert. They pull off the mentele, the mitpachas. He undoes the gartel. Yeah. He opens up the Sefer Torah. He does everything right, and he opens out the lane. Does not the dick turk. He does that stuff. He does the whole Shem Yichad. He does all the preliminary. He looks like he knows what he's doing, but when he has to read the word, he doesn't know how to pronounce them. You understand? Yosa, Yosa, Ez Viltzach. But in that case, it's from laziness. It's from lack of preparation. That's when I read Yosa, that's what I visualize. The guy who goes to lane, or the guy who goes to daven, he does everything right except that Kenish. Otherwise, it's perfect. All the achadas, he looks good. Yeah, he's confident. Yeah, then he opens the ayoyim and it's kum tareis chveis nidvas. Anyway, sorry about my sense of humor. The Alter Rebbe's word is, a person puts in all the work. And the schar isn't there, not because of laziness. The schar isn't there because the Eibush didn't give him that capability. So the Rebbe says there's one bottom line. Right? The Alter Rebbe's words now. Remember I started the Pedic? With a Klal Gadol. A first Klal Gadol. What was the first Klal Gadol? In the first Klal Gadol, we're talking about that person who has real Ava V'Yireh. Full Ava V'Yireh. What did I tell you? As they say in Yeshiva, it's all fine and good. It's all wonderful. That individual who's who learns and thinks and feels and is excited about the Eibush, the point of it all is to take the mitzvahs. And otherwise, it's unfortunate. Whatever words you want to use, it's unfortunate. So the Alter Rebbe put it the other way. If a person goes through all the steps and he doesn't have the Ava V'Yireh, but he does what the Eibush says. So to use the old Chabad cliche, he's done what he needs to do. And that's the connotation of Kach Yossi. That's the connotation of Abisa LaYiddish Ahatz. And I'll give you the physical mashal. Again, I've been teaching this for many, many years. The physical mashal is dominoes. Like one of the things that dominoes are used for is to make a domino effect, right? You line up dominoes, and if you know what you're doing, you can line up tens of thousands of dominoes. You give one click, and they start to fall, click, 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 and all the dominoes fall. If somebody goes to the middle of one of these big fancy arrangements and pulls out one, you start, the whole thing dies. So if you have a domino, learning Chassidus, if you have a domino, thinking Chassidus, and you have a domino being oizgehit and machshava dibur or maise and being careful and controlling one's thoughts, speech, and deed, and you don't have any feelings, there's a disconnect, there's a missing domino. So the Alter Rebbe says, if that domino isn't missing, meaning that even though the Ava V'Yireh is not complete, but there's a carryover from the limud and the bonus to the asiyah, you have Ava V'Yireh. You have Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, even though the Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, in other words, the Ahava, Kach Yossi, it's the Eibush deserves, I should love him. I deserve to love him, but I don't. So there's another barometer. And you derive this barometer from how we said about the first Beinani. The first Beinani, we said he has domino 1, and he has domino 2, and he has domino 3. If he doesn't have domino 4, it's a Shodet Zeit. If he doesn't translate into Sur Meinan, Asay Tev, and Machshava Diber Amaisen, to the whole limud and the whole isbonus, no Ava V'Yireh, it's not Avedis Hashem, it's Avedis Atzmei. Self-worship. So the other side is also true. That if I did the limud, and I did this bonus, and the Ava V'Yireh is not the way it's supposed to be, but the action must be, that's a raya, that the steps before are genuine. You understand? That's the word. That's like Kach Yossi. That's the meaning of the cliche that I introduced last week. If you have a bisala Yiddish heart, you don't have full feeling for the Eibush. You're moved. And the movement translates into living your life. Machshava, Dibur, Umaisen, Sur, Merava, Sei, Teif. Bechaya, Yem, Yem, as Eibush says, you have Ava V'Yireh, even though you don't have Ava V'Yireh. Let's read it now, inside, please. Says the Rebbe. Rak, the problem is, first line on page Chobez Amid Aleph. That means page 43. Shabal Korach Chayes Heda, the person is forced to live in a body, and this person's body, because of the kind of neshama that he has, as I described with you I almost never read the Hagahas of Tanya, but this Hagah I read with you last week, and I repeated it again today. The neshama remains curled up, the body has been stretched out, it's been nivna, and the neshama is still curled up, angevit. Utsrureis bay, and it's bound up in him. Kalmonas chai is like a living widow. A living widow means your husband's alive. If your husband's alive, what makes you a widow? Because you're estranged. Eicha yoshva bodot. The city of Yerushalayim is not called a widow. It's called like a widow. So it says in Chazal, Ki isha shehalach bayla l'mdinus hayam. It's a different husband. Her husband he's still here, but he's abandoned her. So Almonas chayis means, I want to have a relationship with Eibush. He's the husband, I'm the wife. And I'm trying, and he's alive, and I know he's alive, and I feel widowed. I feel I can't get to him. Because I can't develop the Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, because this person's kalim, this person's vessels are incapable of Tfisa Beit to hold Beit, Klal, and the Meibishter whatsoever, and he attempts to use his mind to learn and to contemplate, and his heart to feel as a medium of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's not happening. Says the Alter Rebbe, look at it the other way. Bottom line, you're doing Ratzon Eliyid. The only way you can have the Eibishter himself is Kashat Tfiso Mislabesh and Potato Mitzvah. It says in Tanya Perek Dal, Perek Hey, when a Yid learns Torah and does a mitzvahs, he's holding the Eibishter, and the Eibishter is inside of him, right? Like one who was embracing a king, Hanal, discussed before the end of Perek Dalet, right? Alter Rebbe says if you hug a king, doesn't matter how many shirts he's wearing. One layer, 2 layers, it's a melech. When a Yid does a mitzvah, he's machabek as a melech derech moshe. He's embracing the Eibishter. When a person studies Torah, he's eating like mozeh, makif umukaf, like it says at the beginning of Perek Hey. Right? When a Yid connects to Hashem, to Torah, the Eibishter, this is one of the most important chedushim in the Tanya, that even though it says, Leis machshava tfisa bei klal, there's no way to hold God, there's an exception. Kiyim kasha tfisa bahen, or ki tfisa v'teiru mitzvah. There's no such zayah. This is a Tanya. There's a Lashon Hazeh, Leis machshava tfisa bei klal, avol nitfas ihu beru'usa delibah, which is brought Chassidus. But that's a different avol. In other words, the rule is nobody can have no vessel, no finite entity can hold HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So in some place it says, but the will of the heart, Yechidah Shabenefesh could. But in Tanya it says different. Leis machshov is avol nitfas ihu in teiro mitzvahs. So here we have a Yid who wants to have a relationship with the Eibishter, and he knows that the ultimate end of this relationship is kiyum ha-mitzvahs b'maisa b'pel mavish, keeping teiro mitzvahs practically and not doing chas v'shom the hebech of the Ratzon Eliyid. Yeah. But you have to have the domino of emotion to connect the meditative process, the spiritual process, with the behavioral process. And by him it's missing. So the Alter Rebbe continues. The ilazeh is therefore, yo asol lohen. It's appropriate lahem for these people, l'chabke, to embrace HaKadosh Baruch Hu, b'chalei v'nefesh ha'me'ed, with all their heart, b'chol avavecha, with all their soul, b'chol nafshecha, and all their might, b'chol meidecha. The hainu, this means kiyum atayag mitzvahs, the practical actualization of the 630 mitzvahs, b'maisa dibur machshav, action, speech, and thought, shehi, like it says in Tanya Perek Dalet. Hasaga ha'teira v'yediyas ha'teira, that's machshava. Kanal, as we discussed earlier means Perek Dalet. Says the Rebbe Hine, understand the following. If somebody someone tries to do this is bonus, to do this lima, to do this is bonus, to develop obviously Hashem Yossi, betalum is tvunas liba yamech, with the hidden under feelings in the heart and the hidden understandings in the brain. But upiva liba shav, he's not a hypocrite. As they say in English, he puts his money where his mouth is. He doesn't have avav yiddah, but he behaves as if he does. He doesn't have feelings for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he does what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants nevertheless. Shemekayim kain bepiv. This is what he does with his mouth. Kfi asher nigber, I was determined, betvunas, liba yomeche, in the hidden understanding of his heart and the hidden feelings of his mind, or vice versa. The hainu, this means lihiyes, he knows and he does. B'teiras havayeh cheftzeh, his desires for the Eibishter's Torah. V'yegaban, he studies it and he speaks it and he thinks it, whatever the word higoyin means. Yeiman v'layla, day and night, people with his mouth. V'chei, moreover, hayadayim v'sharivarim, the hands and the remaining organs and limbs. Mekayim and mitzvahs, practically do the mitzvahs. Kefi she'nigmer betfunas libi yamech, as it was determined by the hidden gutter gefühlen, by the hidden bissele Yiddish hearts, in the hidden heart and the hidden mind, which is lacking in full pronunciation, it's lacking full emotion, bringing forward. Hareitvu says the Rebbe, this deficient set of feelings. In other words, the missing domino is accounted for by the fact that you're doing the next one. Domino 1 is there, domino 2 is there, domino 3 is missing, domino 4 is there. If domino 4 is there, then domino 3 is there, even though you don't see it. You're timing, I don't have feelings for the Eibishter. And the Eibishter says, you're doing my mitzvahs, so you must have feelings. Because when you understand the Eibishter in your mind, that's not going to affect your behavior. When you will feel Hashem in your heart, it will. And you're screaming, correctly so, It is a deficiency in Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. Your heart isn't feeling. Alter Rebbe says, but the bottom line is there. No, the fact that the action is there is a proof that there is heart, even though you're not feeling the heart, and we're calling it either Kach Yosa or Abisala Yiddish Ha'at. And we're going to have a couple more names for it as this painting proceeds, you'll see. Hare emphasis, Tvunazu, this hidden understanding. Mislabeshes becomes the energy, is enclosed within. Maise, Dibur, Machshavos, Ateiru, said the action, speech and thought of learning Teir and doing mitzvahs. Le'yesh Lahem, and this Bisala Yiddish Ha'at, this Kach Yosa, this not fully developed Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, is Bechinas Moichin. Moyach, you know what Moyach means? Moyach means the brain, but Moyach also means the marrow. It's what's inside the bones, you understand? Moichin, the marrow, what's inside the muhus of the person. V'chayis and life, v'gatfin and wings, leparchol la'el, that it should ascend upwards. Ki'ilu, as though Oslog Behem, he was engaged with them, b'dechilu, rechimu, mamish. As if he had full-blown Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, which is the madrega of Moichin, it's the madrega of an Hashem of Elam Abriya, Hashem is galus libi, which would have been revealed in his heart, b'chafetze, with a desire, b'chashika, and a longing, and a true kind of thirst, morgeshes, which is felt, which is emoted, b'libi in one's heart, v'nafshatz mela d'Hashem, and his heart's soul, which thirsts for the kuth, because the fire in his heart is impassioned, it's aroused like fire attached to a coal. Canal as discussed before, and he doesn't have it. But it doesn't matter. It's as if he has it. The link is there. Why? Because of the fact that the hidden understanding in his brain, in the hidden feelings of his heart, it's a direct cause. Lasek behem, to learn Teira and doing mitzvahs. If he didn't have this hidden understanding and the hidden feelings, he wouldn't do Teira mitzvahs. Because he'd rather do what the passion, the need of his body alone. And the Rebbe says in the bracket, it's a very interesting limit chus. Even everybody loves their body better more than they love their teva. So if your bottom line is, get some pizza, let them give out a pizza gishmaker. So you didn't get. So when you engage in kiyum ha-mitzvahs, but mamish, and limud ha-teira mamish, and shomen ha-saytei, b'chshav dibur ha-maisa, with a deficient ava v'yira, we say the ava v'yira is there. And that's the second klal gadol. The second klal gadol is that since the whole point of the emotion is the action, so the whole point of the emotion is the action is a proof that there was emotion. You understand? It goes both ways. Since the point of the feeling is the deed is a raya that the feelings are there, but I don't feel. It's not true. The feelings are there, v'haraya, the actions are there. No, but then the feelings could be more pronounced. They could be more acute. They could be stronger. Okay, questions or comments? So here's what's going to happen. I'll make myself a note. Next week's class, next Sunday is the Shabbos, the Sunday before Yitrat. The topic that I want to talk to, you see what I do. I divide up these classes by points. A lot of times I repeat myself because each time I want to focus on different points. Last week we focused on Abisal Yiddish Ha'atz. Today we focus on the words Kach Yosa. Next week is going to be the focus on the words Parcha Liyela. It's mentioned here, it's on the next page. At the end of the page it's mentioned more about Iches. But we'll talk about it now. Okay? You want to say something?
I was going to ask with the Tvuna and with the Bina. The Tvuna is contained in the Bina, or they're two separate things?
Tvuna is considered, Kabbalistically, Bina, like all the other spheres, has 10.
Okay.
There's Chochma Shebebina, Bina Shebebina, Das Shebebina. Tvuna is considered Zayin Tachtenos of Bina. Tvuna means the emotions of Bina. If there would be full Bina, that means there would be real moichin, then the midas would not be hidden. But if there's a deficiency in the moichin, then the midas are hidden. It's backward. It's ironic. The emotional aspect of bina is missing because there's no chabad of bina. So technically, tuvun is called zayin tachtenis of bina. That's how it is in Kabbalah. Okay? Okay, we'll take a break and we'll learn how yem yem. I really thank all of you for coming.